My name is Federico Maggi. I am a senior threat researcher at Trend Micro Research, and I'm here today with my former PhD student, Davide Quarta, who is now a postdoc researcher at Eurocom. And we're going to be talking about MQTT and CoAP, which are two prominent machine-to-machine protocols that work at the data layer. And I'm going to be showing you some security and privacy issues and see how this can be mitigated in the future. This research is being conducted in collaboration or with the support of Stefano Zanero, who is our academic father, so we're kind of academic brothers. He's been an advisor for both of us. And Pujan Shepherdad, who has been Davide's manager during his internship at Qualcomm PSI. All right, let's dig into it. You might not know it, but if you're using Facebook Messenger, you are using MQTT. MQTT is very efficient for distributed messaging that is being used for everything. It's been invented by IBM for home automation, and is now growing super fast and being adopted everywhere, from industry to home automation and lots of things. Clearly, Facebook Messenger isn't the only application that is using MQTT. Many applications have embraced it and are using it a lot. The reason why I'm showing this application here, which is a business-to-business groupware application for a Korean audience, is because I found it during this research. And the reason why I found it is that I found a leaked message, which was directed to some of the users of this application, which was talking about something that looks pretty critical to me. So like a urgent message of a maintenance of design and supply of high-pressure vessels, so something that caught my attention. This is what happened when the endpoint used in MQTT messaging are unsecured, that an actor can get access to these kind of messages. And it happens that the users of these applications aren't just friends who are talking about the weather. Happen to be critical industries in these sectors. So a large consumer electronics that I will not name. I found messages talking about industries in the marine industry, automotive, civil engineering, logistics, medical. Lots of messages on critical, with critical content, or highly sensitive content at least. So I hope I at least got some of your attention. I'll try to get the rest of your attention, maybe the technical audience, about let's see how MQTT works. MQTT is a publish subscribe protocol. You have a broker that talks to clients. Clients can subscribe to a certain topic. You see that path-like expression at the top. It's like, I want to know about station 1, substation 3, and then wildcard. So imagine this in a kind of power plant or something like that. You have several station nodes that communicate to each other. Clients can also publish content under a certain topic. For example, here, the node from station 1, substation 3, reactor 3 is publishing sensory data about the temperature, and the payload is 500, whatever that means. Okay? Clearly, there might be more clients, lots of clients. This is built for scalability. So if you want, you can even have multiple brokers. Generally, the functionality of the broker is one, but you can mirror it. All right. So this talk is also about CoAP. CoAP is kind of the rookie, the new entry in the field of data protocols. CoAP is different. CoAP is a client-server mechanism. So you have a bunch of client and a bunch of server in a network of nodes, and they talk pretty much like your browser talks to a server. So you have URIs, like in HTTP. Clients can send content to servers, and servers can act or answer back with the payload. So it's a very flexible protocol. It's more like a networking library. So if you look at the network stack, what you have is something like this. Usually it sets on UDP for efficiency reasons. This is meant for very low-powered nodes with maybe a battery. You don't want to keep the connection open for a long time, so you just send a message and you hope that it will get delivered. But you can still get some ACK functionality so that you know at least that your message was received. MQTT is getting more and more popular, and CoAP is also gaining a lot of attention. They are both implemented in most of the languages that we know. This is an example search on GitHub, just to give a glance to what it is, to what it looks like. Every language implements MQTT, and the same goes for CoAP. If you go on coap.technology, I think, you will find all the implementation of CoAP. So very popular. Among the applications that these two protocols are good for, the first one that comes to mind is telemetry. In a controlled environment, in a controlled system, the most generic the picture I can think of, we have control software that receive telemetry data from sensors. Very easy. Again, this is an example of a message I found in the wild. I will tell you more about where these messages are coming from. I want to keep a bit of suspense to see if this works. This is a message coming allegedly from an industrial pump. And the content of the sensory data include, for example, pressure or something that looks like a chemical analysis of the content that is flowing through these pumps, I think. That's what I was able to find out. Or another example of a real message I found in the wild. This is coming from a CNC machine. You can see the position of each axis being transmitted periodically to the control software through MQTT in this case. Another example, this is a laser cutter, allegedly from Mitsubishi. You can see it here at the bottom, which is sending power data or power sensory data to a control software. And you may say, okay, this is interesting, but it's only a privacy problem. You're showing us that in the wild there has been leaks of these messages. Yes, that's true. That's primarily a privacy problem, but it's also a problem where the attacker might be able to spoof telemetry messages, because telemetry messages are used ultimately to make a decision. The control software has to know what the sensors are doing in order to take a decision. So even if an attacker only have access to the telemetry information or only have spoofing capability of the telemetry data, the attacker might indirectly be able to influence the control system. Another good application for CoAP and MQTT is device management. So in again, same diagram, you have to bootstrap your nodes. You have to set network credentials, you have to set network details, and all sorts of stuff. Here's an example of 500,000 nodes I found by simple short search, leaking this kind of information through CoAP. You could find the passwords, you can find the network details of the devices, and there are something like 500,000 of these devices out there. So at least I know CoAP is being used for that. Another type of application is command queuing. That's the most obvious one. You want to send actuation commands to your system. Here's an example command. I hope this is coming from a test system, not for a real system, because if it's a real system, it's a metro station in Shenzhen City, and the command is about, let's open the door, and the command is actually executing. So I really hope this is a test system. Very sensitive application for these two protocols is firmware over update capabilities. And yes, we found on the open internet the actual image of the firmware update in an unsecured node flowing out for everyone to see. What you see in the second block is the base64 encoded raw binary image of the firmware. In the first line, you see the URL where the node could fetch the firmware upgrade, so it's same functionality, but the second one is pretty striking to me. The last one is also another example of a firmware. It's written in Lua, so probably it's for some network nodes. Still gives you an idea of how these protocols could be used. I got evidence that these protocols are also used in industry applications, not only by talking to people who work in the field, but also by doing some search in the data that I've analyzed. We found products such as Mainflux, which is an open source industrial IoT management framework. We found more bigger ones like Kepware or PTC, which are well-known industrial IoT frameworks. We also found that MQTT is very good to be used in protocol translation, some sort of as a lingua franca to go from, I don't know, Modbus to Profinet or something like that, because it's very generic. It just transports data in a distributed fashion. And I found, again, by looking at this data, which I haven't tell you yet where it's coming from, I found evidence that these are the protocols that are used that are being transported over MQTT. So you can see that there are very industrial protocols such as J1939, which is used for like industry automation and truck management, like in-vehicle network for big trucks. So I hope I convinced you by this point that these two protocols are playing a critical role for industry IoT solutions. There are several solutions which depend on this. So you may say, okay, fine. Many protocols are used in this area. What is the problem with that? Well, the first problem is where the data I showed you comes from, and how easy it is, if there is an unsecured node, how easy it is for an attacker to collect this kind of data. I highlighted the hash sign because it has a very specific semantic in MQTT. It means everything. It's a wildcard topic. So if you subscribe to a broker and you tell the broker, I want to listen to everything, the broker will just send you everything, because that's the protocol. That's by design. Okay? So a small mistake in the deployment, if you leave a broker open, which could happen even for a short period of time, all the communication can be sniffed by everyone by just subscribing with a command that is part of the protocol. That's the first big problem. I'm not the first one talking about this. Last year at Black Hat US and DEF CON, Lucas Landgren from IOActive has highlighted a similar problem. He went on the open internet and mass scanned the entire IP space, and he was able to find something like 90,000, almost 80,000 node brokers who would just send stuff to whichever client would subscribe to them. So I said, let's see if this research helped raising some awareness. Let's see if it helped people becoming more aware. I repeated the experiment for 4 months at the beginning of this year. You can see the baseline here, 87,000 brokers. And you can see how many unique IPs I was able to find by just, short searching the entire IP space. So this shows how much new brokers are popping up out there every day. And the situation for CoAP is not different. It's actually probably worse. More and more of these nodes are popping up. And the thing is that these protocols haven't been invented they're not really meant to be exposed, easily like that on the internet. Right? They've been invented for home automation scenarios, at least MQTT. So the question now is, okay, how many of these are really leaking data? I don't think that's the most interesting question. I think the most interesting question is, what kind of data is in there? Right? If it's only 200 brokers, which are actually sending out very critical data, that's a big problem for me. So I sat down and I said, let's try to automatically categorize all of the data, all of the messages that we were able to see by connecting to these brokers. So I wrote a few pattern matching routines, and I tried to assign keywords to the data that I was able to collect. This is only 10% of the data that I collected, which is the amount of data that I was able to automatically categorize. Automatically means I didn't take a look at the data itself manually. So you can see that these protocols are being used for transporting critical information in every sector, basically. positioning means like coordinates. I found vehicles with precise coordinates. Transportation emergency, I found ambulances broadcasting their position in front of a hospital. Industry control system, I found robots broadcasting the position of their movements, right? So by this point, you said, okay, but this is just a deployment problem. We just have to, broadcast your talk to enough people until we convince them to close up those deployments and make it, make the world brighter. I don't think it's just a deployment problem, and I will ask Davide to explain you why.
Thanks, Federico. So it came out actually like a serendipity moment, because we were working on this at the same moment and we didn't even know. And I was actually looking at the standard. And so digging in the standard, we can look at the first problem, which is parsing these topic filters. So when a client subscribes, he will ask, okay, I want to subscribe to this given topic, and the broker will filter the messages and send them to the clients that subscribed. For example, here somebody subscribed to station 1, substation 3, and another, again, is the same example as before. And if we look at the standard goes a long way into telling you, okay, these are like the path separators, the wildcard, this is everything, and, well, how do we match it? Did somebody think, okay, let's do a regex? Well, that's how probably topic filters should not be implemented. Why? Because when a client, think of an attacker, has access to both publishing a given topic, but also defining the subscription, he can define the actual regex that gets matched. What's the problem here? Well, it's like a problem known. It was for a long time, even in the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. We can have a regular expression denial of service. In a certain situation, regular expression can get evaluated in an exponential time. So we found this issue in Mosca, which is a very popular broker. It's one of the most popular ones. And as a bonus, we were even able to crash it because there was an exception and catch. Then you could just feed it an unterminated regular expression. It will happily crash. So let me show you a proof of concept for this vulnerability. Okay. So here on the upper left, there's the broker starting, and it was set up with a configuration to store all the messages in MongoDB. And on the upper right, I'm sorry you cannot see it, we're just sending like this small subscribe message with just this open bracket and nothing else, and, well, the broker happily crashed.
That's better, so you didn't see the exploit.
Yeah, we were concerned about
bad,
this.
But still.
Let's dig further in the standard and in the implementations. Another problem we found is that as much simple as this protocol is, you still have some hidden complexity when parsing the packets. And I'm referring in particular to the remaining length field of the packet. It's a field that will tell you, okay, I'm sending you like this fixed amount of data, this is your packet, it's a control packet, and the rest of the data that I'm sending you is long, I don't know, 256 megabytes. It's the most you should be able to send over MQTT. Again, the standard is, I think, pretty clear in the characteristics that this field has, how to use it. They even go as far as giving some pseudocode in order for a developer to implement the parsing of this field. Problem is that there's no check on the boundaries. So you might end up in a buffer overflow situation. This was in the first version, public version, I think, of the standard, the version 3.1. It got fixed in the version 3.1.1, but still the order of the check was wrong. And it finally got fixed in the version, in an errata for the latest version. So this shouldn't be surprising. I mean, it's quite hard to parse natural language. So you don't have a debugger, you don't have anything. Mistakes like this can happen. But when we go from the specification to code, well, we found this in the wild, in one of the most popular implementations of MQTT for Arduino. And you might be thinking, okay, but Arduino is just for hobbyists, you know. Well, no. we found that Arduino, this library for Arduino, was suggested and is used by clients of Losant, which is an IoT platform provider. And fortunately, it was patched. It was not patched super fast. Federico will tell you later more about this, why this kind of vulnerabilities gets a long time to get patched. And we can go to the next problem. So again, looking at the standard, you can get the feeling that there's something wrong here. It's telling you, okay, parts of these messages are strings, like the name of the client or the topic itself. It's just an UTF-8 encoded string. But it will leave freedom to the developers to choose what to do when this data is not encoded in a good way. You receive invalid data, what you want to do? No, it's up to the developer. So as long as it's a valid UTF-8 string, everything is fine. Nobody complains. If the broker developers choose to validate this data, again, the broker just will receive this message, won't send it to any client, still fine. But what happens instead if the broker doesn't validate and all the clients instead do? Well, you will get basically a remote denial of service for free. And it's not as bad as this, because you say, okay, but the client might still keep on reconnecting, so it's not a huge issue. There's a feature in MQTT that is the retain flag, where you can tell the broker, please do send this message every time that the new client connects. So as long as this connect keeps on reconnecting, it will get again this broken message and keeps on disconnecting. We were pretty happy because the MQTT committee was the interaction with them was really awesome. And this was addressed in a note from the standard committee for the current version, let's say, of the standard 3.1. And it was included in the new version, the 5.0 version of the standard. Some of this was implemented also there. So again, from the spec to the code, this issue was fixed in Mosquito. It's basically the most popular broker out there. But again, there we were not super happy, because looking at the data that Federico collected, we're like, okay, the problem is that most of the brokers that are out there are still a vulnerable version. And let me show you a proof of concept also for this.
Devi andare lentamente, stai saltando un sacco di roba. Vai piano, vai tutto il tempo che vuoi.
Okay, on the upper left, you can see the broker, and here down on the right, you can see just the client subscribed to a topic, and I think you will miss the exploit also.
That's good. That's better. It's patched, but yeah.
So now all the clients started. One implements UTF-8 validation, which is the one on the right, and this one on the left does not implement UTF-8 validation. So, oh no, you can see it. Here we have our attacker starts sending just a packet with some invalid data, and as you can see, this client was fine because it didn't implement any validation, and the one on the right instead crashed. If we want to keep this client down, well, just adding the retain flag true will do its job.
Aspetta che stanno facendo una foto.
So we learned a few lessons from this, but I will let Federico talk to you about this.
All right, thank you, Davide. So I hope that, this case is very interesting as a learning case. And it lets me spend a few words on the role of standards and the role of standards in security in particular. I was very happy as Davide I was invited to join the technical committee of MQTT, and the invitation was actually towards, hey, Federico, can you help us, contributing with your finding and your thoughts about making the standard more and more secure. So this is, I think, a very good approach from the standardization committee. We haven't been approached by a vendor. We've been approached by the standardization committee, so the one who takes care of all those patches in the standards that you have seen. As Davide said, it's very likely. I mean, why not? I mean, it's okay. It's just a standard. It's a document written in a natural language. It's, I think, easier to introduce a vulnerability, if you allow me the terminology, in a natural language document rather than it is in C, right? Because in C you have, well, sorry, you have defined behavior. There are some undefined behavior in C, but still, it's more defined than a natural language processor, right? So you can execute C, you can do fuzzing, you can do static analysis, you can do lots of stuff. In a standard, you cannot. I mean, in a specification, you cannot really. So it's natural that there will be some issues, right? So it's fully understandable. So let me go through what the process looks like now. So now you find a vulnerability in a product. Let's say we take a router that uses MQTT, we take it apart, we look at the software, and we find a vulnerability. Okay, so we go to the disclosure broker, or we go to the vendor, we disclose the details of the patch, we hope that the vendor will listen to us, and we hope that the vendor will patch, and we hope that the users will apply the patch, and we hope that this process will go over and over and over. So this, to me, looks very, very difficult already. Okay? But still, this is where we are now. There is also the case where you find a bug in a library or in a generic implementation that will be used by products. And there you have bigger impact. In the sense that if you find a bug here, not only you have to make sure that you disclose the vulnerability, that the vendor implements the patch in the library, you also have to hope that the distributor of the library, if it's not an open source library, will go and knock at all the doors of the producer and say, hey, you should update now because the library has been patched, right? It's hard. It's hard because not all of the implementations at this level keep track of the uses of their library. So it's not something that can be done by simply disclosing a patch to someone. Right? The disclosure itself is an easy process. Okay? Getting to patching and patching the libraries and patching the products that use the library is much, much harder. We found the problems that we found in the standard level. By looking at the standard, we say, oh, that's a critical point. Let's look there. And by incident, there was a vulnerability. Okay, we were lucky because there was the pseudocode, which kind of, had that line, the multiplier was unbounded. That's an interesting case. But still, it's very interesting, I think, as a learning experience to go through the standards, and then you find what you think is a critical point, and then you go in the implementation and see if the developers have made mistake in there. So far, specification on new technology have a security section, but they're usually concerned about, make sure that you encrypt this data, make sure that this connection is not exposed to the internet, make sure that if you connect it to something else, there's a firewall in between. So they're mostly security recommendation on the deployment, which still, we haven't seen it really in the wild, at least according to the previous part of the presentation. I think that what I will bring to the MQTT technical committee and what I think other committees should try to work on is trying to read these specifications with a security mindset. And not only about data confidentiality or data integrity. Look for bugs like this. Look for parsing routines, because that's where the problems arise. We all know it. Right? If you want to write a fuzzer, you go and fuzz the parsing part, because that's where you're going to find most of the bugs. Right? So can't we adopt a similar approach, but for looking at standard specifications? So I'm not surprised this took 5 years to go through all the revisions that finally fixed that vulnerability. I'm not surprised because I think it's natural. I want that time frame to be shorter. All right, so poor CoAP. I haven't spoke about CoAP at all so far. So let's speak a bit about CoAP now. I was actually thinking of removing this part of the talk, but I was contacted 2 days ago by someone who wrote an interesting story, and so I decided this has to be in. So CoAP, as I said, is different than in MQTT. I'm just recapping a little bit. It's client-server. You have requests and responses. Let me turn on the timer again so I don't get lost. It's request responses. And what I really liked about the RFC of CoAP is that it's got a very clear section, simple, well-written on security. I think it's section 11 or 12. I don't remember correctly. But it's great how it's written. It clearly goes through all the potential security issues with CoAP. So, shout out to them. Very well written. They go through a series of attacks, and I would like to highlight one attack possibility with CoAP. That is reflection-based amplification attacks. So distributed denial of service via reflection. There are 3 ingredients which are needed for a reflective attack to happen. You need a protocol that allows spoofing. There we go, UDP. You can spoof IPs, and the destination will not be able to figure out. Then you need a request response based. There you go, we've got it. You send a packet and you get something back. Third, we need to be able to set the size of the content. There we go. CoAP allows to send content to a server, and the server will store that content to be retrieved afterwards by other clients. That's perfect. That's pretty much like memcache. You set something and you retrieve something, right? So I haven't found any estimates on how much amplification power we can get. So I sat down and I measured it myself. I had a Wireshark attached to a test network with a few nodes. I got 2 nodes talking to each other. And if you compare the size of the request, only the payload part is 36 bytes for just a random request, and the response is 89 bytes. So you see a good asymmetry here. It's not great. If you take as a comparison the very good paper by Christian Rosso, it's called Amplification Hell. He goes through all the UDP protocols and reviews them from a reflection point of view. And he goes and gives bandwidth amplification factors of all the protocols. So if we look at CoAP now, it's like the last, the least powerful one. So only 2.5 is not a lot powerful, still it's something. I was not really satisfied with this. So I read again the specification, the RFC, and I found out that CoAP supports so-called blockwise transfer. So you can set a very large portion of data to a server, and then you can say, I want to retrieve it, and I want each block to be this big. Yeah, you can say how much you want the content to be, how much larger you want the content to be. And the second interesting part is the one highlighted here in orange. Both sides, client and server, have a say, so they have to agree on the size of each block. So there is some arbitration in which the 2 parties agree on how large each block should be. So I sat down again and I run again another test. This time I will be the one showing a video that I'm not sure it will show at all. So let's see. Resolution doesn't look like 80p. Yeah, okay, let's trust it. Okay. So I will tell you what's happening right there. There is in the middle here, there is an amplifier. So the server itself, right? I start a standard server, no modification, just the first server, the most recommended server I could find. On the other side, we have the attacker, which will upload a large portion of data. Maybe the portion of data is already on the server, but we are simply playing the role of an attacker that is preparing the preparing the server. So something like 1K of data. Okay, so we have 1K of data. The response is very small because it's simply an ACK. And setting the data costed the attacker something like 1K of bandwidth. All right? Now let's change the blockwise size. Now I tell the attacker, I tell the server that I'm able to retrieve large portion of data, and I spoof the source of my request so that the response is going to be delivered to someone else, so the victim. Now the attacker is requesting the data that they have set. Whoops. Okay, simply a get. Okay, so you see that the requests have costed the attacker something like 57 if we take the entire packet. If we only look at the payload itself is only 33 bytes. And the response size is something like 1048. So let's go back and do, whoops, this is very unpredictable. Okay, let's go back and do some math. This is 32x. So this makes a CoAP go a little bit higher in the ranking and positions it pretty much like DNS or SSDP, which is pretty powerful amplification potential. So the reason why I decided to include CoAP back in the presentation, even though I decided to remove it, is that so far all of this is theoretical. It's written in the specification. I did some tests to demonstrate the feasibility. I was able to calculate 32. But yesterday I was contacted by Katalin, by ZDNet, who was working before reading my paper on some attacks that happened to have 320 gigabits per second amplification power. So this looks a good coincidence. And I say, well, this thing is not just happening in theory, this is happening for real. So there seem to be some attacks going on using CoAP, and the bandwidth amplification factor happens to be exactly what we calculated. And remember that about the 500,000 node I found by searching on Shodan. So we have plenty of nodes that attackers could use and actually are using apparently. And we have 21% of autonomous systems on the internet who are not immune to spoofing. Nowadays, spoofing is still possible on the open internet because some providers are not taking appropriate measures. So to conclude, let's look at the big picture of the entire talk, and let's see what are the takeaways. The title of this presentation was Security and Privacy Issues with Machine-to-Machine Protocols. We've looked at the root causes of these security and privacy issues. We've looked at the changes in the design and the role of standards in introducing / preventing or predicting, if you want, the appearance of vulnerabilities. We've looked at how many implementation vulnerabilities there are out there. In the paper that I will show you in a few slides, there are all the details. And we've seen a huge problem still of deployment. Still many unsecure brokers are out there, and CoAP servers as well. This opens up the possibility for data validation vulnerabilities, protocol parsing vulnerabilities, feature abuse, such as amplification, listing all the privacy-sensitive content flowing in the broker, and ultimately, if you really want to abstract and be able to talk to C-level security officers in an organization, you want to show these keywords. So you can tell that MQTT and CoAP could be used and have all the potentials, and in some cases are used now for reconnaissance, lateral movement, industrial espionage. We've seen how much passive intelligence we can get from connecting to open brokers, right? That's pretty scary to me. Remote DOS of a machine, targeted attacks. So since the URL is pretty long, I decided that since it's become pretty common to take pictures of slides while someone is talking, you can just take a screenshot of this presentation, this slide here, and you will get the URL of the paper that has been published 2 days ago. For some reason, if you can't parse the QR code, just go to the blog of Trend Micro. There is one of their most recent shares is exactly this paper. Thank you very much, and I think we have plenty of time for questions. So, yeah, thank you. So, are there any questions? Yes, there's a. I can't really see because I have a light beam. Yeah, one right there.
The presentation you showed like the Chinese app, and you said that it was investigating that Chinese app that you found like the.
I found so there was a Korean application, yes, Asian speaking, yeah. That's okay. It was a Korean app for a group where, like, you work for a company and all of the employees have this app and they use it to chat, exchange email, and do real-time communication among colleagues, right? I didn't know about that application. I found it from the messages I was observing. Like, I was taking a look at this leaking brokers, and I saw this message passing by saying, oh, urgent maintenance, vessel, high pressure. That sounded something critical, so I went back and I tried to figure out if there was some information that would allow me to find a target, right? Which is actually an interesting thing because, by looking at the message, I was able to find enough information to find a target. So if I wanted to target the company who was using this, I could do it if I wanted.
So the entire chat was exposed?
Yes. The broker was exposed. Yes. Sorry.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question. As I understand, the basic defense mechanism is correct configuration of the broker.
Yes. There are issues with the configuration. So if you don't configure the broker, which is not secure by default, that's, I think, one of the big problems. Because if you just download the broker, the most popular broker, you install it, you power it up, no authentication by default, right?
So there are manuals outside how to do it, or there is no fix.
Yeah, there's a lot of tutorials out there on how to secure properly MQTT. So it comes out kind of also as a surprise to find lots of brokers not properly secured. There's also different ways to secure it, let's say. I mean, you can have authentication. There's brokers that implement ACLs. So the way to secure it are out there. It's just that people is not using them.
Yes.
Also, I think one nice example of how to properly secure MQTT is given by the Amazon IoT platform. I mean, if you look at how they did things, it's perfect.
Yeah, you can't, even if you try to deploy an open broker, you cannot. It's impossible because they force every node to have a certificate both ways. So it's impossible to make an insecure deployment. That's a good example that we cite in the paper because of that reason. All right? We'll be here for a while, so thank you very much for attending.
Thank you very much.